nitzachon, victory. Is there any Talmud Chacham who does not have vengeance and retribution like a snake? He's not a Talmud Chacham. Even though retribution and vengeance are two mitzvahs lo saseh, they're negative mitzvahs, you're not allowed to have them. That's so long as you're not a Talmud Chacham. But if you're a Talmud Chacham, not only you're allowed to have them, you must have them. But the condition is you have to be a Talmud Chacham. And what's a Talmud Chacham? It's a Talmud of Chochmah. Chochmah is of total bittul, as we learned in Tanya the other day, a level of something which is beyond comprehension, the Or Ein Sof. A Talmud Chacham means you're a makabel, you're tuffle, your whole action, your whole being is nullified at all times to this level of Chochmah. It's much like the hay we were describing in the last classes. In other words, you have no real sense of self that dips below the line. So such a person, his fight is Hashem's fight. His battle is Hashem's battle. Therefore, he can't just let things roll and let things lie. He has to take up the vengeance of Hashem. And of course, it's a completely different type of vengeance. The vengeance that's prohibited from the Torah is an Indian of money or something related to money, like honor, self. Whereas the vengeance of the Talmud Chacham, the Netzachon, this victory and this endurance, this is obviously in Yanim of Kedusha. It's for Chachma that he's doing it, for the divine. So then we'll take it from the line that starts Ha-Chochma, page 131. Everyone has it?
What line?
It's about 12 lines from the bottom. Ha-Chochma. Shezeu b'klalos inyan nitzachon. This is in general the concept of nitzachon, of victory. But nitzachon hu begadol dafken. We said nitzachon is really only found, this midah of victory, which really means to win. It's only found in a big person. Because a small person, we said yesterday, he might not roll over and let the other person just go so easily. He might complain, he might be stubborn, but to actually win, to put forth your justifications, your power, and to make sure that you are vindicated every time and you overcome the enemy, this is going to be the bigger guy. He's going to win. Pashit, at the end of the day, you can say what you want, but the winner is going to win. And that means that nitzachon, the power of victory, comes out of a very big person. He's got a strong power behind him. V'kol misha gadol yoser, anyone who's bigger, midas hanitzachon hu biyoser etzlo. So he has a bigger midah of nitzachon. It's the definition. V'lechein hamelech shegadol mikol ha'am. Therefore, the king, who's the biggest of all the people, tezem mailas hamelech. That's what a melech is. That's his whole definition. Shu bachir ha'am. He's the choice of the people. V'gadol mihem, and he's greater than them. K'moshe kasuf gabi Shaul, as it says regarding Shaul, the first king of Israel. It says, "Ve'ein ish mibnei Yisrael tov mimenu." There was no man amongst the Jewish people better than him. Mishichmo lamayla gavoa mikol ha'am. And literally, it was a physical manifestation. It says from his shoulder and up, he was taller than every other person of the Am Yisrael. He was just bigger, literally, and obviously spiritually and figuratively than every other person. Shaul, the first king. V'lechein hinei bo shayach in hanitzachon yoser. And therefore, in a king, it's obviously shayach the Indian of victory much more. Legalos ratzona v'chavtzo lehotzi nitzchono, to reveal his will, his desire, and to bring it out that it would be victorious. In other words, anyone's going to oppose the king and get away with it, it shows you that guy's really the king, right? He's able to step in and put his will before the king's will. The king is actually not such a big man.
If it goes unanswered.
Yeah, it can't go unanswered. If it goes unanswered, really, the king is showing that he's not bigger. And therefore, he really doesn't deserve to be the king. His Indian is that he rules with his will every time he wins. We're saying this about Yiddishkeit, basically. You know, it sounds a little bit off when you're just talking, if you're just talking regular talk here, because obviously we said yesterday, dominating over somebody and so forth, these are not good midos, you know. It's good to be humble. It's good to let a person, you know, affect you and you don't respond. There's all kinds of stuff. What we're talking about is like basically Mordechai, Moshe, the Rebbe, Baal Shem Tov. In other words, the idea of the Yidden in general, they can't afford to lose a battle. We lose, we stop existing. So the idea is that we never lose. There's something kicking inside of a Yid which keeps on coming back and bringing it, and ultimately the fact is we've never lost. Because if we had, we wouldn't be here anymore. So there's a certain victory, which also, the word Netzach also, as we said yesterday, means endurance. It means forever. The word Netzach has two meanings. Victory and forever, eternal. Because if you ever lose, you're not eternal. Right? So your victory is that you constantly and forever, if you're the bigger one, your midah of Netzach is greater than somebody else's midah of Netzach. Right? And that's what this says every year. There's the famous, Dida Netzach. We say we are victorious. Where does that word Dida Netzach originate from? From the Midrash about Sukkot. It says every year the non-Jews and the Jews come together on Rosh Hashanah, and the world is judged, and we don't know who's going to win. Right? So we see the Jews come out with their lulav and esrog in their hand. It's like a sword of victory. We know Dida Netzach, our side won. Right? This is we're holding the sword of victory. So every year this happens, right? This takes place. So there's never been a year we didn't win this battle. Remember we said before that the name of Hashem, when He is called the warrior, the man of war, is Netzach, is Tzivakos. First of all, the holy name of God, the one of the 7 holy names that cannot be erased, is Tzivakos, Hashem Tzivakos. And we said the name, every name of God corresponds to a certain area of the tree of life, and Tzivakos represents Netzach and Hod, we said. And Netzach and Hod is the place from which all war comes in the world. In other words, if there's going to be a war in the world, it's deriving its life force and energy from Netzach and Hod, the Shem Tzivakos. And now we understand why. Because a king has to win. And when Hashem is basically saying, like, excuse me, I'm in charge over here, right? Then there's going to be war in the world. There's going to be some kind of a disruption of, he's not going to be pushed over. He's not going to let the dark side to overcome him. There's going to be a get that guy out of office type of thing. And there's going to be a victory that takes place. So this is called the cause of all war that will ever take place, is really from an inner attribute of victory inside of a person, the person who's launching the war. Right? His Netzach is triggered and therefore makes him go to war. If he didn't have a Netzach, then he would allow himself to be overcome. When it comes to war, there's really 2 reasons for fighting wars. Halef lishlol shalal libos baz. One is to basically go collect booty, go collect the spoils of war. Right? Yeah. Yaakov liked that one. Anyway, the spoils of war. This is one reason for fighting war. You just want to make yourself richer. Right? You're a billionaire. You want to be a multi-billionaire. So you go pick on some, lowly land development thing that they don't have a chance of against you, and you're going to go just take more for yourself. In other words, you're hungry for more spoils. So this is one reason that people fight war. But the base, the second real reason of war is lahotzi nitzchono. The real reason of war, well, he just says the second one here. He's later going to say it's the real reason, the ultimate reason, is to bring out your victory. Very interestingly. In other words, shehi kirtsono v'chavtso. You just want things to go your way. In other words, you're not just trying to grab a little bit more here and a little bit more there, get rich, so you fight. That fight is like a weak man's fight, right? And the proof is, if they would fight back real strong and you'd realize it's not so easy to take the spoils over here, you'll go find spoils somewhere else. You're not going to win, you're not going to go all out in that war if it's merely for spoils. Because you're only looking for the profit of it. And if the profit is going to wind up being minimized by the losses of the war, you'll stop fighting. That's not real nitzachon. Nitzachon is when you want things to go your way. And you're stubborn about it. Right? And you're so stubborn, you're willing to fight, and it depends how important this battle is to you. If this battle is worth the world, you'll fight the whole world. Which the Jewish people have pretty much been doing since the beginning there. You want that things should just go your way. You want to bring your victory to out. And as I was saying before, this is really what war is all about. This is the true reason to fight a war. The whole idea of it is just to bring out your victory. To win. To milchama lishlo shalal levos vaz, any war which is merely to go gain spoils, hu milchama shel koach ugavura bilbad. That is from a different midah, actually. It's not really nitzachon. And the proof is, your nitzachon will not come to the table and stay operational so long as it's not worth it. Nitzachon, remember, is something that never goes away. It's eternal. So if you're going to bring out your nitzachon, it's not going to disappear. You're all in. That's what nitzachon is. Nitzachon doesn't have a reverse, right? But gevura has a reverse. This is a war merely. It comes from a different sphere. It comes from just might. I'm strong. There's things that can put strength in its place, right? Like, for example, somebody else's nitzachon, right? You won't go very far if you're just fighting with might and sticks and stones against someone who's fighting with their principles on the line, right? So this is merely a war of gevura, koach, and gevura bilbad, power, might. Milchama bechlalus, but war in general, like the art of war, kolomar haskala shav milchama, right? There's something called the intelligence behind war. It's a fabulous, awesome thing. I mean, God forbid anyone has to get hurt. But the actual strategy, it takes the most brilliant minds in the world. It all comes from the Torah. It's like the most, David HaMelech was the greatest warrior. What was he doing all day? Sitting and learning Torah the whole day. He learned the strategy of war from looking in the mystical diagrams, right? So this haskala of war, hulahotzi nitzachon, this really means how to win. It's not a game. Right? You're talking about fighting against the Philistine, you're fighting against the Amalek, you're fighting against the enemies of Jewish people, Midian. There's no chance to lose. And just like Moshe, if he wants to kill the Egyptians, going to utter the name of Hashem, we're not going to lose because God gave us the instructions. There's an instruction to war and how to bring forth your victory. It's a whole mighty manifesto. And he says this is what war really is. It's not just a show of strength. War is a deep thing about how to win. To make sure that your netzach comes out, your victory, that everything goes your way. But very interesting that when does this power and art of war actually come to the fore? When does it have to be delivered and revealed? Only when there's an opponent who's trying to hold you back. Right? Netzachon, the meat of Netzachon, which is this awesome thing, which is like an eternal power of God that can never lose. There's one thing that it requires in order to show itself, and that's an opponent. Az shayach Netzachon. Only then, when you have an opponent, is it really relevant, the idea of victory. Which, what are we hearing from here? This is again like the whole philosophy of Hasidus is like in this one line. Because Hasidus comes to tell you the unity of God, and therefore it's the one place you're going to ever really find an answer to why is there evil, right? And because if evil seems like the opposition of God. It means like there's some kind of duality, something's opposing God. And from here we see why is there something that opposes God? Because only with opposition, it's the most treasured thing that there is, in fact. Opposition is your best friend. And all the dark things that Hashem made, and the klippas, and the things that look like they're holding you back in life, and everyone's crying and saying there's no God, when they see opposition, if you only knew what opposition was really there for, it's to bring out your nitzachon. The power of Netzach is the ultimate midah. There's nothing greater than it. It's eternality itself. Because it never loses. It shows that the money's always there. Right? It never goes in reverse. And you can only see this awesome power in yourself, in the Torah, in Yiddishkeit, if there's an opponent. Otherwise, you wouldn't really know. Okay, it's great, we're winning, we're powerful. But what would happen if someone challenged us? Maybe we would go away. So we'll never go away. We're eternal Netzach, which is the ultimate divine midah, eternality. Who can claim eternality except for God? It only comes out when someone challenges your eternality, when there's an opponent. And the same thing is true with your Amunah. Is your Amunah going to be there forever, or are you going to lose it when something happens in your life when you don't see that there's reason for it anymore? Not just Amunah, but Bitachon, etc. To below Menagid, without an opponent, Eino Shayach Inyan HaNetzachon Klal. It is completely irrelevant to ever see this midah of Netzachon. You'll never know it in yourself. A king who's never challenged will never show how great of a king he is. He'll just rule his dynasty, his kingdom, whether it's the kingdom of his own household or his own Dalet Amos, or the kingdom of America, he'll just rule it like the way he wants to. As long as nobody opposes him, you're not going to see how he handles the opposition, how he brings out his Netzach.
See in America how that's handled very soon.
We've seen it already to a strong degree. Trump is the man when it comes to Netzach, right? How many people? All right. We're not getting into a whole situation here about Donald. But all I'm saying is that you see that Mamash, what the one thing that a man has is Netzach. I mean, you can't come into to a presidency with the lowest popularity rating in the history of the universe and just like water off the back. You know, he's like doing something over there. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. Amnam. However, kasher chafetz be'ezeh davar, when you want something, v'yeshno menaged lezeh, but there's a big opponent to this. Not on my watch, we're building a wall. Right? When there's an opponent, let's turn the page. Omed b'nitzachon kenegdo, you stand with your Netzach against it, umotzi nitzchono. We're going to see who wins this one, right? Again, you have to be very careful if it's selfish and you're doing things for money, as he says, and for honor, then these are horrible midos, right? But if you're doing things because you're a Talmud Chacham, right, and you're going to like fight this battle, mamash, for God, then it's you have to have these attributes. That's what I'm saying. You have to be very careful, getting excited about a bully also. Someone who's gonna win every battle is also a despot and a tyrant. He also has these powers very strongly, right? He'll die for his cause. So I'm not saying that these are always godly causes. These could be the very worst of powers, right? But in Kedusha, the godly soul, because at the end, why is it really Kedusha that owns this? Because Kedusha will always win. In other words, the bad guys, they're not going to stay forever. They will go down. Because the spirit of God's Netzach, that's the only thing which is truly eternal. Something which is not God is not truly eternal. And therefore God is Ish Milchama. He's the master of war in the end, because he's the only one who's never going to lose. So you better be fighting for him. Otherwise you cannot access the true Netzach. So if you want to do something, and someone stands opposed to you, you're going to stand with your victory against him, and bring out your victory. In order to overcome the opponent, this is a very powerful line. Very great symbolism involved here. The Rebbe speaks about it often. It's like one of the jewels of the Maimer. He says that when you're going to bring out your nitzachon against an opponent, what are you willing to do? Mibazbeis, you're willing to waste all the glorious treasures of the storehouses of unbelievable wealth that was gathered over the duration of years and generation after generation. In other words, a king sitting on like mamash, a mountain of wealth that he inherited from generations of his fathers, and the kingdom has gone on. You can imagine like a dynasty for hundreds and thousands of years, and he's got all the wealth in the world. When it comes to someone who's going to really mess with him, if this is a war of principle, and it's a war of ideology, and he must win, then he's willing to waste, in a lashon of just throw away all this, because what's it worth if he does not win? He needs to win, or he's not the king anymore. His opinions are going to be set aside for somebody else's opinions, and someone else is going to be the king. So what is wealth worth? In the face of Netzach, all of your other powers are totally subservient to it in an instant. Your mind, your heart, your intellect, your wealth, your connections, your honor, your glory, everything you have, your body itself, your physical existence, if it's a true Netzach, your soul is so imbued with this Netzach, it will even take your body and your life and dispose of it if it has to. That's what real Mesiras Nefesh is. That your cause is so in deep in you that every aspect of yourself is expendable, including your life, because this cause is bigger than my physical life, and you know that. So you're willing to literally do anything because of Netzach. This midah is the ultimate of all midos. Certainly you're willing to get rid of all the wealth of the entire kingdom if need be. No one ever used such wealth, the shum for nothing, was sitting in a mountain of treasure. V'kamus v'chasum me'ein kol roeh. It was hidden and sealed from the eye of any beholder. Hine be'eis nitzuach hamilchama. When it comes to the moment of winning the war, hu mevazbez kol ha'otzros. He's willing to dispense of all of the treasures. V'hu lefi demidas hanitzachon hu l'mayla miratzim ve'oneg. This is very high. And it's because the midah of nitzachon is above will and pleasure. Will and pleasure, respectively, are called the keser, the lower part of the keser, the higher part of the keser. Right? We talk about arich anpin, atik yomin. So when you're in the keser, there's generally two parts. The keser represents, in general, powers which are not, we call them makif. Why? Sovev. Why? They sort of surround you. They're not in your body in the normal way. Because unlike your intellect, and unlike your eyesight, unlike your power of movement, these things invest themselves into your goof in a particular place and get lodged in the body. So your soul powers, as it were, are sort of invested and trickle down into all of your body parts. So we said there's 613 parts of the body, there's 613 parts of the soul, and each of them sort of trickles down and finds an actual physical place where it lodges itself. Like, for example, your eye, your vision of your soul goes into the eye. It doesn't go into your ear. Right? Your hearing goes into your ear. Your intellect goes into your brain. Your excitement and emotion, it lodges itself into your heart. Everything goes into its place. But the will and the pleasure, these are two powers of the soul which are higher than all the other ones. And the proof is there's no place for them in the body. Where's your will?
They're all over the place, no?
They're everywhere, right? In order to move your arm, you have to have a will in the arm before you can access the power of motion in the arm. In order to think, you have to will to think in order to activate the thinking powers. Anything you're going to do, the will is underlying it, and it's because the will is distributed every single place in the body, and at the same time, no place in the body can say it's there. And that's because it doesn't lodge itself in. It's not a or panimi. It's not a light which gets contracted and grasped by any particular power because it's beyond grasp. And therefore you can't find a place that it is, but you also can't find a place that it isn't. And that's because that's the definition of makif. Like the Orain Sof, you can't find a place that it is, but you can't find a place that it isn't. It's everywhere.
There's willpower in your nose?
There's willpower in your nose.
Yeah,
How?
Where is love located?
It's inside right here.
Above there, below
Love?
there? Yeah.
Love's in the heart.
What is love?
Now here's the thing, that's will. Pleasure operates in the same way. You have your whole body is basically pleasure sense. And what's the true proof of that? In order to activate any activity, you have to first activate your will. But in order to activate your will, you have to have a desire and a pleasure in that thing in some way. So you won't will anything unless you first have a pleasure for that thing. Once you have a pleasure, then a will. Then you'll find the corresponding body part which does that, and it'll activate in the real world. So you see that will and pleasure are sort of these makif powers which, again, are not found any particular place, but at the same time are found everywhere in the body.
I didn't understand. Where's love? It's
Love is in the heart.
Yeah.
Love is a finite attribute which is found in your heart, right? In other words, it vests itself into an actual midah, and you feel it physically. What's that?
below that level.
It's below that level. It's below that level. Yeah. Like let's say if Keser is the spheros above there, it's the 11th sphere above the 10. So Chochmah Bina Dad, intellect is the three intellectual ones, and then you have the emotional ones. That's where love comes in. It's already the lower 7.
Which one is it of the 7? Is it like all of them?
Chesed
Isn't it
is
plausible
love.
to say that also with love, a person could be willing to do anything also like myself?
Well, the thing is, when it comes to the emotions, like the word, for example, ahava, really contains in it the word ava, which means to want. The emotions have a very, very big connection to the will. And that's why, not every time a person loves, will the love go to that extent that he's going to give his whole life away for it, right? It could be that a person's in love with this particular woman, or let's say, but she's not Jewish, I'm not loving her anymore. Like, you can stop your love, right? But you can't stop your will, especially if it's driven by your Netzach. Like, in other words, and that will also drag your love with it. So if you decide this is like the love of your life and you're going to do anything for this person, it's really your Netzach, which is now commanding, like it would command you to unleash all the wealth, and it would command you to unleash all the soldiers, and it will enable you to give your whole body if need be. It also has it has all the powers at its dispensal. So it'll look like love as well. But really what's driving, you see the love itself, not every love goes on forever, right? Love which is based on a thing, right? Ava taloya b'davar. There's a Mishnah that says a love which is based on something, it will not stay forever. If it's some kind of a selfish thing, like we said before, I want to get rich, I want to take the spoils of war, I love this person because of really me, so that's not an enduring love. But if it's a true love, a love of God, so yes, it's really going to access, really what you're seeing is not just love, because along with that love is fear and admiration, and all the midos, right? So it's not so much love that it's, Hollywood it says is love.
Lust.
Yeah.
So, remember that it's way higher than
Yes, I'm getting to that, yeah. You have a question? Or you want to so I mean, I don't know between man and a woman necessarily, he started talking about love, but in general, I was trying to make draw a picture. That you see that I was trying to explain what tainug and ratzon are, will and pleasure. They are makif powers which do not find expression in a panemiistic way, but they're like everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And so those are usually, when we talk amongst friends over here, mostly that's like the highest thing we talk about. If you can access your ratzon, you can access your inner pleasure, then you go into a state of makif. But here we're saying that the nitzachon is higher than those two. What is higher than those two? Right? What part of you is higher than the unseeable and ungraspable part of you, which is sort of like, usually you would think that pleasure is really the singular underlying power that rules all your decision processes. It could be divine pleasure. But in other words, something's triggering something which is triggering something which is making you move. And usually what we think about is what's triggering that is your inner delight in something. And your inner delight, let's say you want to have like a Jewish home and you want there to be Torah in the home, so that's your inner delight. So then your will comes out. And your will is like, okay, then I guess I have to be a Talmid Chacham. So then you're going to go and put your mind and your heart and everything into sitting in yeshiva for 15 years. Right? And all this, and you're grueling and you're sleeping on the floor and eating bread and salt, but it's all based on your pleasure that you want to have a Jewish home with a Talmid Chacham in it, and it has to be you. So you can see that pleasure ultimately is usually the thing which bases our entire life. What we're saying now is a big chiddush. There's something beyond pleasure. Something which could drive you and even force your pleasure. It can direct your pleasure. It can make it change. Usually the pleasure is the leader. Whatever I have pleasure in, that's what's going to direct my life. Netzach trumps that. It precedes that level. And therefore it has the power of what directs your pleasure, what you're going to derive pleasure from. And again, the only way it can come out is with an opponent. So it's very, very interesting. You don't always have this access to this Netzach, because the only reason this Netzach comes out is if someone triggers the opposition. So you could be living a perfect life, enjoying your Talmid Chacham life in your house and everything, until one day someone comes along and challenges you. And then you will redirect everything based on this Netzach. Even your pleasures, you will derive pleasure in different things. Because the main thing now is surface, your essential backdrop is that you have to win. And therefore you might completely change what's pleasurable for you from night to day. Well, you might have thought this was pleasurable, now this is horrible, and I need that out of my life. Because essentially, winning is the most important thing.
But that itself is pleasurable.
No, well, that pleasure is a response to that. It's not that winning is itself pleasurable. Is that because winning is beyond pleasurable. Winning.
It makes a person pleasurable to win, so he changes his pleasure for higher pleasure, right?
But it's not. But that's the idea of winning for the sake of, let's say, getting something for yourself. That's the idea of winning for the sake of getting spoils. That's pleasurable. That's really that the winning is because of pleasure. There is a type of war that you're fighting because of pleasure, but it's not Netzach anymore. The real Netzach doesn't have a reason. The reason is, I'm going to win. This is enduring. This is eternal. This cannot be overturned. Right? It cannot be any other way. It's not because of a reason. That itself is the reason. It's irrational.
But that alone, that's a quality that also makes a person pleasurable. I'm going to win.
Yeah, but like
no, but what pleasure can be hatched from that. right? But it is not the source of that. You understand the difference? You understand the difference? You're right, I'm not arguing with you that the way you're understanding it is a true way of understanding it, but it's not Netzach anymore. Because if the beginning of the game is, this is going to make me feel good, so then whatever's going to come out of that is not Netzach anymore. It's some kind of like an acquisition of something from this world, which is going to make you reach your goal. But it's not, and it could be winning will make you feel good. But that's a type of winning, which is not the same type of winning that we're dealing with anymore. It's a winning because I get something out of my winning. I get pleasure. Like, because what do I really want? I want the gold and silver of this particular village. So therefore, it's gonna launch an attribute of victory in me. But that's not what we're talking about. Here we're talking about a situation where the victory has no prior cause. It's an essential aspect of you, which cannot be of any other way. It's you. It's not because something about you. And therefore it will bring to life all types of attributes, that whatever it needs, pleasure, will, intellect, emotion, all those things will summon to the cause to bring the real you into being. And this is basically, we're discussing God right now. Why does God all of a sudden create divine pleasure, divine will, divine attributes? It's because the essence of Hashem requires those things for it to express its true self. So all those things are sort of secondary and caused by the Netzach. You following this?
Picking up what you're putting down,
all right, great. I love when you say that.
So it's a survival. It's going with survival.
It's really survival.
It's Holocaust remembrance.
Survival of the fittest.
Okay.
And related to Holocaust survivors.
Yes.
And that would have brought out some essential life force to
Right.
survive.
Every day.
Right. And they're not even trying to survive anymore for the sake of pleasure, right? It's not like it would probably be much more pleasurable for them not to survive, frankly. Right? But there's something essential, and what it really was in them was the Eibishter. It was like Yiddishkeit was what made them need to survive. It was God that made them need to survive. It wasn't their own existence. Many of them would probably be happy to Pashut lose it. It was such horror. But something essential says live, right? And it's basically Yiddishkeit, which cannot die. So it's higher than Ratzon and Oneg. That's where we left off. V'hine kol ha'oneg hanaleh v'hanifla. All the pleasure, which is so wondrous and awesome, sheyesh b'segulos malchuso, that he has in his treasure house of his of wealth, v'otzos yikaro, and his tremendous wealth, hine eino tofes makom klal legabe netzachon. It all is meaningless when it comes to his victory, right? Where this was something that he was living for. Like I said before, he wants to be a Talmid Chacham. He has a dream. He's going to put his whole life to gather all this wealth. In an instant when survival is on the line, all that holds no place anymore to him. He would literally just abandon it with simcha for the sake of what's truly important, which is his existence. So you see how it just negates everything else in its path. And why is that? Because as pleasurable and joyful as it is, winning and existing is much more essential. It trumps joy. V'od yoser, and what's further, and this is the point I was making before, which is I think the most dramatic point, shagam chayav mashlich hamelech menegdo. Even his very life, he would throw into the cause if need be, because what he's fighting for is actually bigger even than his own survival. It's the cause in which he sees his survival as part of, that he's really fighting for. So when it comes down, he won't even just get rid of his most treasurable possessions being his wealth, he'll get rid of his most treasurable possession being his own body. Because there's something bigger than his physical life, and he knows it. And the only thing that's going to bring that out, what's bigger than your physical life? Some kind of a power which is beyond your existence, which somehow you're a part of, and it makes you realize that you're willing to forego your existence for the sake of it. Because of the awesomeness of this victory, he himself is not going to just send his money and send his troops. He'll himself stand in the throes of war. And here's the reason why. It's because Netzach is planted and rooted in the very essence of the soul, which is above any of the powers of the soul, any of the revelations of the soul. So we talked about many, many times, there's the idea of essence and revelation. And even revelation comes in two parts. Revelation can be finite revelation. Hashem can reveal himself as 10 spheros. And revelation can be infinite revelation. Hashem can reveal himself as infinite light. So that's basically the difference between your 10 soul powers versus your ratzon and your oneg, your will and your pleasure. They're like infinite powers which don't fit into the body. That's why you can't find them in your body. They're everywhere and nowhere because they represent a representation in yourself of Hashem's infinite revelation. But whether it's a finite revelation or an infinite revelation, it's all revelation. And revelation never really gets to the core essence. No matter how much you'll try to reveal something, it's always a ray, an expression of, and not the thing itself. So Netzach, on the other hand, is the one contradiction to that. Netzach is an expression of the thing itself. Because the one thing that the essence cannot do is go away. That's the one thing it can't do. Light can come and it can be stopped. There can be a tzimtzum. It can be withdrawn. Even infinite light. You can make a space where the infinite light doesn't shine. The one thing which can never go away is the atzmus, is the essence of the thing. That's what makes it essence, is that it's essential. And so the one thing that can drive it to show itself is only when something tries to make it go away. The only way you can prove that this thing is essential is if there is a tremendous level of opposition which makes it try to not be essential. And that's why every single generation they come up and try to kill us. It's not really, there's a kavanah behind this. It's to show every single generation that the Jewish people cannot be destroyed because we're essential. If it was just a ray, a revelation of God that we were, that can go away. So you actually can reveal the essence, but not with light. You can't show it. You can only show that it never goes away. And therefore what brings it forth is Netzach, victory. Every time we're going to win.
Is that what we're still here?
So we can show you what Netzach is. Because if Sitra Achra wasn't there, you'd never see it. And this is the thing. That's why the darkness, this is what I was saying before about Hasidus. It shows you what the function of darkness, what the godliness of darkness is. Because it's in the darkness itself which reveals the essence. You can never see the essence if it wasn't for the opposition. And the opposition itself is created from the darkness. And it therefore shows you the true root of darkness, something beyond light. Something which is essential and is beyond light. So the whole weird dynamic there. It's in the dark thing itself, which is not light but rather dark. And in that dark, what is it really? It's not something which is opposing God. It's something which brings out the very essence of God. And that's what we always say. There's an advantage of light over dark that comes from darkness. When you have to turn the darkness and show what the darkness really is, then you get the ultimate level of light. Not from light itself. You have to see what darkness really is and the purpose of it. Because only that can show you the essence of Hashem. And that's why Hashem gave His Torah to this dark world. Because the Torah is Hashem's essence, and the only place it can reveal itself is where there's darkness. And that's true in a person's life as well. Now you can turn it around. In other words, right away you can use it, for its. You can refine it and use it for its positivity without sort of getting dragged down. That's the whole idea of shtus to kedusha. If you allow darkness to just be darkness and mess with you, then you're going to always be in a fight with it, and it's always going to be in a state of opposition. Yes, the opposition will eventually help you, but if you take darkness and you are shtus to kedusha, you use the darkness itself, the folly itself for God, lechatchila, so then you go lechatchila transforming this thing into light, and you don't have to basically fall prey to it. This is the idea of like reaching to our truly makif powers.
But is that why the Jews are still here and they won through everything?
Yes. We're eternal.
Eternal.
See that as like something like we can only be what do you call it? Benefit from it for so long. You kind of get like tired of it. You don't want to roll around the dirt. We don't want to.
Right.
Especially you feel like it's unhealthy.
Right. Because something comes. That was the whole idea from the beginning of the mimer, right? Some test will come to you and say, "No, I'm Jewish after all." But you can, right? So then you fight against it. Then you throw off the ruach shtus. But what I'm trying to not so like properly say here, but I'm trying to get at, is that you don't have to wait for that experience of falling in the mud. You can lachatchila be vigilant and bringing forth your nitzachon all the time, and it would just look like you being a wild man for kedusha. You could be in a state of fighting a war because you're realizing that this level of the eternality of Hashem must always be brought forth, and therefore you're like in a fighting zone, even though there's not really an opponent. The opponent is like the would-be threat of anything opposing kedusha. That's called shtus to kedusha. You're like running around the world like a madman on some kind of a mission that nobody sees, right? No one sees what because especially nowadays, there's no communists coming after us, there's no Greeks coming after, there's no Romans coming after us, right? So to be on this mission, who are you fighting against? What's the opposition? So you're saying I'm gaining the power of opposition from the theoretical would-be opposition of something could come against darkness, and therefore I'm like vigilant in the war. And that sort of sidesteps the need to fall and then have this opponent come against you and then sort of have to deal with the dark elements of the dark side. In other words, the negative elements of the darkness. I'm not sure if I'm making that point very clear.
What happens with Netzach in the time of Mashiach?
That's one of the things is that it says when Mashiach really comes and the whole revelation happens, we're going to long for the days of the exile. There's something that the exile has in it which we will not be able to access in the days of Mashiach, and this is what it is. In other words, I remember Rabbi Gafni told this whole story that he was at one time he went to some kind of a Fabrengen, and there was this altar chassid who was like saw the Rebbe Rashab, and he was like sitting next to him, and they asked Gafni, say a few words of Torah. So he was a big Rosh Yeshiva, so he was embarrassed. There's this great chassidim all around him, and he said, okay, and he started giving over a mimer about the qualities that the exile has over the time of the Beis Hamikdash. And this is the qualities, that there's a certain power of overcoming evil and bringing out our real essential qualities, which you can't get when the lights are on. There's many maimarim that talk about the maila and the advantage, thank you, of being in a state of darkness versus light. So he's going on and on about this, and the older chassid sits by me, knocks him on the leg. He's like, don't get so excited about the gullus. Yeah, so he learned a lesson. You can't take this word too far, but if you want to, you could. It's a very strong point what he's saying here. Look, it says when
it's good right now. Like it's good. It gives you the energy.
That's what we're saying. It says that Eliyahu Navi to announce Mashiach, and Mashiach can't come on Friday. It's going to bother the people from getting ready for Shabbos. So the Rebbe often, when it would be Friday, he would say Mashiach should come right now. And if you'll ask me, it says Eliyahu Navi can't come on Friday, so he says when he comes, and he'll answer all the other questions. He'll answer this one too. So I'm saying the same thing to you. Where will Netzach be in the days of Mashiach? He'll answer that one too. We'll access that as well.
We cannot have
because going to be in a way the ultimate revelation of it, because
it will be, but you won't be able to see it. In other words, necessarily so easily. Yes, it will be an eternal house.
Right.
But the idea is that every moment of that eternality, theoretically, I'm saying you're right. Ultimately, you're right. But theoretically, how do you know if tomorrow it's still going to be there? The only way you could know now is someone's going to try to oppose it, and it will win. So it shows you that it's never able to be destroyed. Without that opposition, we cannot, that's what he's saying here, we cannot see and release the midah of Netzachon without opposition. War, which is the midah of Netzach, can only come out when you have something fighting against you. So you have to explain that some way. Okay, we could come up with explanations, but the easiest way to explain it is that it looks like someone's trying to attack. And hopefully in the future we won't have that problem anymore.
Does that relate to Hod in any way? Is Hod what sort of resisting it, or is it from other things that can...
Hod is not necessarily resisting it, no, it's the Sitra Achra which is existing it. It's all the 10 spheros and the 11 spheros and the 12 spheros that are all on the side of darkness. That Hashem is making, just like He's making 10 spheros and attributes of goodness, He's contracting them and making attributes which conceal goodness. So those forces are the ones that are fighting against the Netzach of Kedusha, and it continuously opposes those.
So if it's balanced with Hod, then it becomes more effective.
He didn't get to Hod yet, but yeah, he ultimately will get to Hod. But Hod, basically, it brings we'll find out, but it brings the Netzach into sort of We'll find out. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna have to find out. Looks like tomorrow, actually, because we're out of time.
Go to sleep now.
Yeah. All right, passing the
papel.
I'm gonna pass in the copy.